Now, joining us live from Washington, D.C. is Anyeze Osakwe to bring us updates on reactions to Tinubu's speech addressing United States President Donald Trump redesignating Nigeria as a country of particular concern. Good morning, Anyeze. Good to see you on the morning show.
Good morning. Good to be with you all.
All right, excellent. So now that President Tinubu has spoken, have you seen any reactions there in Washington based on the president's speech?
You know, it's significant that we heard from President Tinubu because ever since this story first broke last weekend, we'd kind of been wondering when we would hear from him. We heard from different members of the administration, from the Chief of Defense, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of Information. So it's good that we finally heard from President Tinubu himself speaking in Abuja just yesterday. And, you know, when it comes to the reactions, I mean, President Tinubu did say that they were engaging with the world diplomatically and that, you know, he vowed to end terrorism. But when it comes to the reactions to that speech here in the U.S., we really haven't seen that many. I mean, it might be due to the fact that the speech or the declaration itself was somewhat wedged into a larger speech about Eurobonds. So, you know, it was just a couple of seconds that the president actually addressed it, as opposed to President Trump, who is, you know, dedicated an entire video to designating Nigeria as a country of particular concern. But as far as the big media outlets here, CNN, Fox News that we were talking about yesterday, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and the likes, we really haven't seen them respond to these comments from President Tinubu. We also haven't seen government officials here, President Trump, Ted Cruz, all of the people who've been at the forefront of this conversation, calling this Christian genocide in Nigeria reality. None of them have responded publicly to President Tinubu's speech. And, you know, in terms of thinking about this as a diplomatic situation, it makes me recall an incident from earlier this summer when President Trump was meeting with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and other EU leaders, and he literally paused that meeting to go and call President Putin. I mean, that was such a striking moment, and it kind of made me think, is there a chance that President Tinubu and President Trump will speak on the phone? Is there a meeting that's scheduled? Because as far as the diplomatic conversations between the U.S. and Nigeria as they stand now, there's still a lot of ambiguity, despite the fact that President Tinubu says that they're engaging diplomatically. We haven't seen that as the public and as the media. It hasn't been clear to us.
Okay, so later today, one of the congressmen Trump asked to look into the issue, Riley Moore, will introduce a resolution on the persecution of Christians in Nigeria. So what more do we know about this step and the growing opposition from the other U.S. Officials against Trump's military plans?
Right. So, you know, when President Trump first put out that video, he called on two specific Congress people, Representative Riley Moore from West Virginia and Tom Cole from Oklahoma. And Riley Moore is basically putting forward this new resolution that is really just going to affirm America's stance in protecting Christians in Nigeria. This is on top of the bill that Ted Cruz has already put forward as well. And what's interesting about Riley Moore's resolution is that he's really glad that this momentum around this Christian genocide is gaining traction, because in a new interview, he talks about how the U.S. has given, in the last few years, the U.S. has given Nigeria billions of dollars in military assistance and security assistance. And according to him, it just hasn't yielded much. And I actually looked into it as well, because all of these numbers are public. They're all online. And since 2017, approximately $650 million has been given to Nigeria in security assistance from the U.S. and approximately $1.8 billion in foreign military sales. So for him, this is just a moment that, you know, they can actually potentially see where all of that money is going. And then finally, I reached out to a Democratic congressperson who is on the Africa subcommittee. His name is Congressman Jonathan Jackson. And interestingly enough, he completely opposes this move from President Trump. He called it reckless. And in a statement that he sent to me that's now public, He says that Christians and Muslims in Nigeria deserve compassion, not exploitation, saying that America should be a partner in healing and not a hammer looking for a nail. So I'm emphasizing this to just show how there's some sort of a diversion, as there usually are in politics in the U.S., between Republicans and Democrats, where a lot of the Republicans are rallying behind President Trump, but when it comes to some of the Democrats, they're against this military intervention, and they're making it known as well.
Annie, and thank you so much for bringing that point across, because I think we also do need to remember that there's politics being played within the United States as well concerning this issue, and both sides are going to use it to try and leverage some type of support from their followers. But I move forward. It was also revealed that the U.S. military had already established plans on what possible military interventions could look like in Nigeria. Now, is there a sense that this is something the larger public in the U.S. is truly ready for?
Right. So, we've been discussing this bombshell New York Times report for, the last day or so, and them essentially saying that as soon as President Trump put out that message on Truth Social, Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, as he's now known, immediately reached out to the U.S. Africa Command and told them to send him over the plans about what a military intervention in Nigeria could look like. So, they broke it down by light, medium, and heavy, and just very broadly, the light would just be, partner-enabled communications, so the U.S. military helping to defeat Boko Haram. The medium would be drone operations, so operations from the sky. And then the heavy would be actually moving an aircraft carrier group and long-range bombers into the northern part of Nigeria. And what stood out from this report, though, is the fact that these plans were not necessarily considered priority, or they weren't considered, something of a national security issue that the U.S. had been looking for 2025. And according to military officials, the American public hadn't shown that much interest in going forward into Nigeria in an Iraq or Afghanistan style approach. So I think this shows that as much as governments may want to kind of militarily intervene, there is a need to kind of not bring the general public along, but have some sort of support, as we've been covering as well here. The government shutdown is happening, airports are having their crisis, and Americans really want to know that the government is paying attention to what's going on at home instead of trying to fight wars abroad. So that was an interesting dichotomy that I thought we should point out.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Great one.
Thank you for pointing that out, Anyeze Osakwe. Do stay warm in Washington, D.C., and thank you so much for these updates. And gosh, I think we also do need to remember that the midterms are coming up. The Republicans just dealt quite a blow in the last election just last week, and we shouldn't be a pawn in their politics.